Welcome, everybody. My name's Mick Wyther. I'm a consultant from Australia, been gratefully brought on by Mr. Robert Akinta from Commonwealth of Learning to work on this project with you, which is the design and creation of learner guides and assessments for units of competency from Certificate 1 in clothing production in Namibia. So welcome to you all. I know you probably got a lot of expertise, particularly in the TVET sector, and welcome to also to members of the steering committee who are here today. So this project is looking at the TVET system in Namibia. So let me give you a quick introduction to that as I understand it, and then we'll go through the unit of competency together. But first, a bit about me. I work in a TVET registered polytechnic, if you like, here in Australia, and I teach remotely. My home is 120 kilometres from the campus in Melbourne. I teach remotely 4 nights a week, a TVET qualification at Certificate 4 level to prepare people with industry experience to become trainers in the TVET system. So lots of variety of people, lots of diversity, lots of different industries to kind of bring together. So it's fascinating. We had a good session tonight, and they're all preparing for assessments that are going to happen during the week. So that's why I won't get here today until 1 p.m. Our times don't quite align together very well. But no problem. We're going to talk about the Namibian TVET system. And first thing we should note is that, like many TVET systems around the world, it's competency-based training. So competency-based training sort of says that someone has completed an assessment task or unit of competency once they satisfactorily demonstrate that they can do the work and the task and understand the knowledge. So it's very much outcome-based. It doesn't rank learners according to their performance, like, say, higher education may. It's more about the individuals. There's no competition. The individual can either do the task or they can't. If they can't, they don't fail. They might get another opportunity to be able to go away, practice their skills, refine their knowledge, and then come back and try again. So it's a good system in that way. In Australia, we have 3 attempts that students can make, and some of my students tend to use every last opportunity to them. But they get there in the end. The system doesn't discriminate whether you complete the first attempt or the last attempt. So it's very much performance based. Can you do the work or you can't? And so it's also, more importantly, aligned with what industry needs its workers to be able to do at that particular job level that the qualification is training them for. So industry usually gets involved in the development of these qualification standards, as we'll see as we go on. So in this project, what we're doing is we've got a few different stakeholders here today. We've got the steering committee members from the wider regulator in your country, and we've also got instructional designers with a broad range of experience in designing education in a wide variety of contexts. And then we've got subject matter experts who I believe are from community-based colleges who are working currently with the cohort in this particular qualification and have been delivering training that kind of equates to that level. So to be a valuable resource in informing what units look like. And I would have loved to have had one of you SMEs when I wrote the drawing unit. I didn't have it. I only had Copilot and ChatGPT to help me and a bit of Google research as well, which was kind of okay. So 2 roles here. The RD is going to write the knowledge instructional content and activities. And the SMA is going to provide input around ideas and example tasks. So one of those ideas can be thinking about examples of situations that you can write as a possible case study or a scenario to assist learners to understand how kind of dense knowledge, concepts, um, manufacturing outcomes actually happen at work. So it becomes a bit more palatable. Part of the role of the subject of the ID is to consult with SMEs for industry examples and practice tasks. So in a later video, I'll discuss ideas for working together and for some principles that no doubt you follow when you write learner guides and assessments. So the objective is on day one, day two, that we start working together to build learner guides and summative assessments for these three units from the qualification in clothing production. Now I'll come back to these a bit later. I won't harp on them, but you can see one is a health and safety unit, and 87, 88 address specific clothing production skills. Now, 1793, the way it's been written, it asks you to consider health and safety issues in a clothing production context. So that's what we mean by using industry-aligned training. I quite like this because in my country, we've got a generic health and safety unit. You can plug in whatever industry you like, but this one takes a bit of the guesswork out of it because it's actually specifying these are the safety aspects you need to know in this specific industry. So that's a real bonus for us, I think, today. Then we've got project objectives on the second day. So hopefully we can get, it's a big ask, but we can try and get through at least one unit by sort of end of day two. And then day three, we'll work on these particular units. And day three, I might also talk a little bit about assessment writing as well. I think you'll be doing well if you get this done. And I can provide you with other videos when you go back home to work on this independently. So project objectives will explore some AI prompts to speed up the process a bit. And I wrote a unit of competency from this qualification in a day and a half. And so it was a bit difficult. It was a unit that wasn't very long, but it's very practical. So thinking of practical task applications took a bit of work, and so those prompts can really help you, and I'll come back to that. And the other thing we're going to try and do is write it at a good level for the cohort that's likely to be here. So if you think about adults possibly returning to study at a later age, or young people moving from a successful and or an unsuccessful secondary school environment, if they've got that far, into the qualifications, people with illnesses, people with disabilities, people with neurodiverse issues. These are all the kind of common issues we see in all courses in Australia. I'm sure you do too, and that we have to take into account when we create our learning resources. But your subject matter expert will know much more about that in the context of Namibian training than I ever will. So take note of them and see where that can help you. So let's understand the VET system in Namibia. So we've got some key big players. I think some of you here today, welcome to you. The Namibian Training Authority. So it regulates the system. The system comprises usually of training providers who are registered to deliver the training. They may also will include people who are registered assessors in recognised assessment centres to be able to do assessments. It's also a process of moderation, which we'll talk about later. And then you've got the Namibian Qualifications Authority, who manages the qualification registers. So these are the collection of all the courses that are available in the Namibian TVET system, and we'll have a look at that a little bit later on. But both bodies will work with industry stakeholders to ensure qualifications and the levels that those training is provided is relevant to what industry needs for its workforce. That's the kind of entire point and connection with competency-based training is this is education and training to prepare workers for particular roles in particular industries. So it's criterion-based and it's evidence-based. Now, criterion-based means that the learner can be either has the skills or they don't, as I mentioned before. So they get additional opportunities to try that. The evidence-based performance means that if somebody performs a skill, then an assessor will be observing that skill alongside a accepted assessment checklist to determine that the learner has the skills described in the unit and in some cases can repeat them or transfer them to another kind of job situation. Uh, Criterion-based assessment means you can do it or you can't, and you get another opportunity if you can't to go away and regroup. And so it's a really big part of this particular system. It's not about competition. It's about a particular level of performance. If you exceed it, then you're still just competent. And we see this quite a bit. It gives you the benchmark by which all learners have to ascribe. And if they don't meet that benchmark, then they have another try. And if they do meet that benchmark very well and even excellently, or they still just get a competent result. And that'll often happen to you in your programs. So the assessment, we have unit standards who are listed on the National Register of Qualifications, and they're the benchmarks for assessment. We'll look into these a little bit next, in the next video. So there's the industry-determined performance specifications that outline the skills, knowledge, and attitudes required to operate effectively in a specific industry or occupation. Now, this is very similar to Australia. So you've got skills, workplace performance, you've got knowledge, concepts, ideas, theories, legislation, policies at an organizational level that contribute to an understanding of how the performance task is to be conducted. And then attitudes are all about your soft skills. How can you work with other people? How can you solve problems? How can you put the group and safety ahead of your own specific needs at work? So attitudes is a really big one. And I have that issue with it with my course as well, in trying to get learners to understand these are the professional behaviors and attitudes that you need to show if you're going to be working. So it's also about things like emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, those kinds of things, if it's specified in the unit of competency. So that's where we take our cue. So the system has VET assessors. And so assessment has to be undertaken at registered assessment centres by registered assessors and moderated by registered moderators. Let's unpack that a bit. So I'm assuming, I don't actually know, and somebody can confirm this, but I would assume that a registered assessment centre is a place where someone also receives training. Now, I could be wrong. And if it is, then that's a separate system divorced from the training method, but your guys can fill me in. Registered assessor is obviously someone who's gone through an assessment process with the regulator that says that they have the skills and knowledge of the training system and assessment practices to assess learners across a whole range of different types of assessment. And registered moderators and moderation is the process of looking at assessments that have been conducted and examples of students' work and determining whether those registered assessors have made the right decisions about whether a learner is competent or not, or whether they've missed something, or even if the assessment doesn't necessarily allow for full coverage of the unit of competency, which is what we call validity. And assessment tasks are valid when they cover the entire unit of competency. And as I said in the bottom there, assessment tasks for a unit of competency must address the entire unit. So what are the implications for us? Well, simple language and very clear instruction, and focus on practical, hands-on tasks linked to industry as described in the unit and mind mapping documents. And we look at the competencies and the units of competency, how they've been written. They very much have that focus. They're task orientated. So you have to kind of get away from writing knowledge and more about writing instruction that will assist a learner to understand some of the concepts behind what they're going to do with examples and opportunities to practice. And I'll show you an example in the exemplar unit that I've written a little bit later on. The system also has a training, a qualification framework. So it divides qualifications up into 10 levels, which generally would describe the level of autonomy, responsibility, and independence a worker might have at work, depending on the level. So at level 1, you're probably not going to have much autonomy, not much independence, and not much responsibility. But we go up the scale, they probably are. And generally, I don't know about Namibia, but certainly Australia, the 10 is usually reserved for PhD level. That's the end of the line as far as the training level. So 1 to 10 represents a pathway where someone, once they get through certificate 1, get into work, get some opportunities, they can then back those opportunities up in experience by doing the next qualification at level 2, level 3, if it's available, 4, 5. And so gain more experience, more training, more know-how. It's a great system. It's really designed to propel learners to wherever they want to go according to their demands and the opportunities that's thrown at them at work as well. Now, every unit of competency has what's called a credit, and 1 credit is 10 hours of learning. Now, this 1 hour of learning doesn't necessarily mean the time the learner spends in class. It includes time for independent study, independent practice, and independent assessment. So the unit I did has 6 credits, and so that accounts to 60 hours of learning. And you think, well, that's a lot of learning. And it is, but when you start to write practice activities, some of them might take your learners 3 or 4 hours to get through over a period of time. So don't think that you have to write 60 hours worth of learning material. Stick to the unit and take that. And we can make up those hours, as we should, through targeted practice as preparation for their final assessment. So the units guide the development of the learner guides in this project with the help of mind mapping, and I'll talk about that more. They align with assessment and they align with industry practice and standards to ensure relevance. But you will be the judge when you view those, particularly SMEs, whether I've got that right. And feel free to amend anything I've created to better suit the context you've got there that you know very, very well and I don't. So final assumptions: entry-level training in the clothing industry, competency-based training, and we're going to write at a lower level with lots of language support for the cohort. If we can probably make some assumptions with, your SME will be able to fill in those assumptions as well from their experience. Okay, if you've got any questions, then there's quite a few people in the room that you could probably put them to. So I'm going to give you a chance to pause, and then I'll end this video. In the second video, I'll come back and look at the structure of the qualification that we're going to be working on today. Thanks very much. See you soon.